Cyclone Hidaya makes landfall in Tanzania on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for May the 4th. Cyclone Hidaya made landfall in southern Kibiti District of Tanzania, not far from Mafia Island, earlier today at 11 AM Eastern African time, with winds near 70 miles per hour. We're still code blue for the storm right now as it moves inland and is weakening rapidly. In the Atlantic, it's 28 days until Atlantic hurricane season begins, and this is what the tropics look like right now. Very quiet, as a matter of fact, with a big line of low-level storms there from Venezuela northeastwards through the mid-Atlantic. It's only 11 days until the hurricane season begins in the Eastern Pacific, and it's gone even quieter than it was in previous days. In the Tropical Convergence Zone, a little bit more suppressed than it was yesterday. Well, in the Western Pacific, there's not too much going on here right now either, but there are some pretty decent storms affecting the coast of Vietnam and Hong Kong, southern China region right now, and one or two little things out there in the Philippine Sea. In the North Indian Ocean, it's looking awfully quiet here as well, with pretty much nothing there in the tropical zones. The Australian region, we're still thinking about designating one or two little things up there well to the north of the top end, but still no clear signs that we'll get any developments, but there are thunderstorms up there through the Indonesian islands and east of Papua New Guinea as well, a significant thunderstorm there. Cyclone Hidaya is now quite a bit inland and is continuing to move westwards. It is now a 50 mile per hour tropical storm and is expected to weaken all the way down to virtually nothing by the time we get to probably tomorrow. And the South Pacific is still looking quiet as well. There's just one or two little storms there in the tropical zone, but really nothing to talk about in particular. And so we'll take a look now at a close-up of Hidaya and its progress. Of course, it's moving quite a bit inland now already. It's 43 kilometers from Ikwariri, 65 from Kibiti, 171 from Dar es Salaam, 201 from Morogoro, and 404 from Dodoma, both of those latter places well inland. It's still significant, it could produce significant rainfall amounts on top of anything that's already occurred, and this is an area that has been significantly impacted by flooding leading up to this storm before it even affected the region. So we're obviously very concerned about further flooding issues and humanitarian issues there. Check the satellite imagery and you can see the movement of this storm has stayed pretty much westwards, so the GFS was almost right with its forecast the other day. Meteo France haven't got it right, unfortunately, with their forecast for it to curve northwards and not even make landfall actually, but it did, and it made landfall just southwest of Mafia Island along the coast, a fairly sparsely populated region of Kibiti District, and now moving inland, passing just south of Ikwariri, which is a substantial town in the region. Satellite imagery here, looking at all the visible bands, and you can see that it's just really starting to loosen up, and all of that tight convection is really starting to fall away, and indeed the cloud top heights are decreasing, so the intensity of the storm is very much on its way down, and that includes the rainfall rate as well as the winds. Here's a look at the Atlantic right now, the eastern United States. Quite a lot of precipitation going on, some more severe weather, nearly severe there, moving across the central US, another enhanced risk day today in Texas. And this is the Caribbean area that we were pointing out before, some thunderstorms blowing up over the northern part of South America. And this is off the coast of Western Africa, just a little thunderstorm moving off the coast, and the Eastern Pacific has gotten a lot quieter compared to previous days, with those thunderstorms showing very small aerial coverage now compared to what it was a few days ago. They weren't ever going to form anyway. And this is the Western Pacific showing some more thunderstorms blowing up across the Philippine Sea and those very low latitudes, and Mindanao having a wet evening as well, it would seem. And this is the Indian Ocean region. There's a lot of convection, very busy around here. India getting a few spots of very heavy rainfall, as well as Myanmar and Thailand and other countries around there, Laos and Cambodia probably. Sea surface temperatures pushing up and above 30 degrees Celsius in significant tracts of the Eastern Pacific. The loop current is looking better in the Atlantic, and the Gulf Stream very much looking better as well. It's expanding its coverage over 28 degrees Celsius in a few spots off Florida, and around the Lesser Antilles looking good there as well, up and above 28-29 degrees. West looking decent here as well, especially in the South China Sea where it's over 30 degrees Celsius. Philippine Sea, the western half of it, really starting to ramp up there as well. Bay of Bengal is extremely warm, as we've been mentioning for a few days now, 32 degrees in a few spots of the tropics in the Bay of Bengal, Andaman Sea and Eastern Arabian Sea. Southwest Indian Ocean, temperatures around Tanzania are still holding at around 29 degrees Celsius despite the storm Hidaya. To its east, those temperatures have dropped a little bit off northern Madagascar, and temperatures around Mauritius are still holding around 28. Of Australia, we're still looking at some decent temperatures here as well, off the top end and even off the Kimberley region and Western Australia, 28-29 degrees in a few spots there. And in the South Pacific, our temperatures are looking good over northern Vanuatu, most of Fiji, and Samoa, up and above 30 degrees in a few spots still. Compared to average, it looks like this. The blue areas are below average, the orange areas are above average. Western Pacific is near average in the tropical zone, but in the subtropical zone it's looking a bit better than that. North Indian Ocean is very much above average in a few spots there, and in the Atlantic it's the main development region that's well ahead, about 3 degrees above average, although the subtropical zone is actually below. In the Eastern Pacific, of course, we've still got the equatorial area there, the signs of the La Nina, and the northern subtropics there also below average, but in the main development region there it's looking normal to slightly above. Oceanic heat content is still sky high in the low latitudes of the South Pacific. In the North Pacific it's looking like this, with the Eastern Pacific starting to get a few orange spots there, really getting some energy, and in the Western Pacific some very high amounts there in the Philippine Sea ahead of what could be our first storms. And here's a look at the Atlantic. The Western Caribbean is looking like the best area right now, especially near Jamaica, which is really piling on some oceanic heat content there and extending through into the open Atlantic. So let's take a look at the computer models. There's not much to talk about with Hidaya anymore, so let's take a look at the Australian region, where we've still got this inkling of one or two little circulations popping up in that sea area in the eastern part of Indonesia through all those islands and off New Guinea. But it doesn't look like anything will get organised enough to become a tropical cyclone in that 5-day period here, but certainly I would expect we'll be seeing some gusty winds in the whole region and some pretty heavy rainfall. Here's the rainfall potential still for Cyclone Hidaya along the coast of Tanzania. We're still looking at one or two spots that could be quite high, and obviously we're concerned about flooding already in this area. So rainfall is expected to accumulate in the next coming days as well, south of the landfall zone, but certainly inland in the interior we could see some significant amounts of rainfall from the storm right now, getting up to around 4 inches, that's 100 millimeters, getting up towards 7 inches in some parts of the south region along the coast, that's getting up towards 200 millimeters. On Zanzibar, it's possibly getting up to 3 inches there, that's around 75 millimeters, and maybe a little bit less for Dar es Salaam. But certainly looking inland where Hidaya is heading, that's probably the biggest focal point right now. In the moderate range, this is the Western Pacific showing up a substantial tropical cyclone forming, so signals are increasing for this now. Actually becomes a typhoon within that 10-day period there. It starts off to the south of Guam over Micronesia, moving west-northwestwards, broad from the offset, and then continuing towards the west-northwest there, becoming a substantial Category 1 by the time we get to the end of that 10-day period. And here's the Australian region where we start to get another little system showing itself, and it does go. Off it goes westwards and becoming quite a substantial storm. Look at it blow up there into a category 2 through the Indonesian islands. Very far north compared to what we would normally see in this region. But if it is going to happen, it would be late season, and it does move off towards the west in tandem with that Western Pacific storm, peaking at around 105 mph winds on that. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all our items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request. Yep, it's still there, still waiting for Hone. And in the Scilly range, well, what happens to this Western Pacific typhoon? Well, I can tell you, it blows up even further, and there it is, becoming a category 4 on the GFS forecast there by the 16th and 17th of May, clipping the northeastern tip of Luzon with a pressure of 937 millibars, and then sweeping up further north, swiping the southern Ryukyu Islands of Japan, and making it into the East China Sea as a typhoon still at that point, which honestly doesn't happen very often in May. Usually the storms either recurve completely or they get stuck near the Philippines and die off quite quickly, so we'll watch that one very closely. And then we have this storm moving north of Timor and then near Yamdena there, and moving through not far off the coast of Java either, continuing westwards. A very anomalous storm that would be if we got anything like that. Watch again as it piles through those islands with hurricane force winds as we go through the middle days of May. That is still very long range, but the initiation point of that is within the 10-day period. What happened on this day? It was a possibly forgotten storm, but it's another one like the ones we've been seeing lately on the On This Day section. Another category 4 piling into Myanmar, and it was 1B. They didn't have names back then, but there it was, reaching category 4 status on this day, May the 4th, 1982, early in the morning, and then it moved eastwards, swiping into the coast of Myanmar in pretty short order. Nothing else was active on this day in this particular year, but I think that was enough to be covering if we were there back then. Well, back to today then. We are code blue for Hidaya, and the first name in the Atlantic this year will be Alberto. In the Eastern Pacific it's Aletta, and in the Central Pacific it is still Hone. We're at 16 storms so far for the year. The average per year is 92. We are falling a little bit behind. In the Western Pacific, Iwinia is next up on the naming list. In the North Indian Ocean, it's Remal. And in the Southern Hemisphere, the next name in the Southwest Indian Ocean, if we do get another one, and I've already forgotten it, the next name is Iali. In the Australian region, it's Robin. And in the South Pacific, it's Pitta. That's all from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow.